Welcome to Tax Defense Connect by DPZ with your host, Delphine Parigi. In each episode, we will discuss keeping and defending your empire against tax fraud accusations. Please note that the contents, opinions, discussions, and any other related information from this podcast is not intended to be tax or legal advice. Individuals and representatives of entities should consult with a tax professional based on the specific facts and circumstances of the taxpayer to determine how federal, state, and foreign tax laws as applicable may apply to their specific situation. You can find the show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Now here's the host of Tax Defense Connect by DPZ, Delphine Parigi.
Hello everyone, I'm really happy to launch this fourth episode of Tax Defense Connect. Today we are very lucky to have as a guest my colleague and friend Catarina Breia from Portugal. When I say colleague, I mean we've been working in different cases together. Catarina Breia is a brilliant tax advisor for more than 25 years regarding risk management, regarding being a tax arbitrator, advising company and business leaders on tax compliance, on lots of topics. Today, I ask her to be my guest to have a compared approach about criminal tax, whether in Portugal there is any criminal tax or tax is only, I would say, tax investigation and tax audit, or is it linked to what happened in France and other countries where it can become to jail because of tax fraud. So today I really thank you and welcome Catarina Breia.
Hello,
Catarina.
Thank you for the invitation. It is a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you very much to have accepted this special invitation talking about a topic which is different from attracting residents to your country to come to all this very interesting regime in Portugal, and to have accepted to speak about a topic which is less, I would say, attractive. Maybe Portugal is also attractive for this question about how far a tax audit can go. So maybe we can start with the first question of what is the message you would like to give to professionals, CPA, tax advisor, lawyers, listening to this episode regarding criminal tax in Portugal?
And this is advice that I give actually to clients, to my clients, that a tax defense really starts much before there is a dispute. It starts when the company anticipates a transaction and plans it. Of course, if options exist, the taxpayer should choose the best one, either from a substance or a tax efficient perspective. But then you have an invoice that is recorded, a position that is taken for tax purposes as well, and so on. And so my key message is that a tax position must be provable, not just explainable. And if a file is clean, consistent, and prepared in the right time, contemporaneously, that's why it is important to deal this process, documentation process, while the transaction is planned, implemented, just to avoid the risk of being questioned at a later stage if an audit comes.
I have a small question to react on what you just said. I really appreciate this sentence you say that it has to be probable. And is there something about how far can it go regarding the penalties in Portugal? This is my first question. And second question, how are the relationship with the tax authorities in Portugal for when you have a tax audit? Is it written, oral, easy?
In respect of your second question, let me just tell you, sometimes what happens is each company has a tax auditor, a regional tax auditor. So it means that, for example, if because of certain red flags, the company is subject to an audit, it's common that either a call or an email is received by the company in respect of a certain year or tax or whatever. What is recommendable is that every request is written, because sometimes they can be orally made and then it is difficult to learn if the procedure started correctly. So my recommendation is that keep the process written in order to be very
It's
fast.
possible to ask the tax authorities in Portugal to say, please write your request?
Yes.
Okay.
If this is not done automatically, then we would recommend that a written request is made and say, please ask your request in a written form, or please initiate, because sometimes it is possible, for example, within the scope of a VAT reimbursement, it is normal for a certain request of additional information is more informal. But you know that you are within a process that is normal for additional information to be requested. If the request is outside the scope of this regular procedure, if it is a one-off, then I would recommend this to be on a written form in order to be, because there are rules for audit to open certain tax years.
You know, I think it's even more important today with the potential fraud from AI. You know, nowadays we are not certain to speak to someone we think we are talking to. So I think it's both for tax audits, as you said, from the proceedings, but also to be sure we are speaking to a tax inspector and not to
Exactly.
a fraud. Yeah, it's very
Yes,
interesting.
true.
When can a tax issue become a criminal tax issue in Portugal? That's why it was a bit my first question about when you have a tax audit in Portugal, what is the level of the penalties? The reason why I'm asking the level of the penalties is because we know today that there are no harmonization rules in the double tax treaty about the tax penalties. And I think the OECD is currently working on, European Union is currently working on trying to harmonize the penalty. So what is the average or the highest penalties you can have in Portugal, and other consequences?
We have a code that specifically deals with that. So there are two types of degrees. For example, a simple mistake, that is a mistake that sometimes happen, has a lower degree of importance, and that type of a mistake is subject, may have certain fines that are lower. So for example, so if you, instead of putting a certain number in a different line in the corporate income tax form, that is a mistake that sometimes can happen. So it has a lower importance. And then there is an aggravated degree of mistake, which is when the fault is intentional.
Like
And
a
of course,
hidden permanent establishment, for instance? Yes.
a fraud,
Yes.
if you commit fraud or whatever. The tax code defines both, and you have different fines for each one. And within a certain process, there is a specific fine. To be completely honest with you, that is an area that lawyers, I'm a tax consultant, although I'm a tax arbiter,
I understand,
I
and
know
thank you very
that,
much
but it's not,
for.
but they are being applied. And of course, there is a process of
Yes, of
demonstration of
course,
the type of
you,
error.
yes, yourself, you guarantee that it will not be in this scope. And then, of course, if there is an audit because your client didn't tell
Of
you,
course,
then it will go to the lawyer. So if my question was a bit legal.
no.
And
No, but it's important because I think that is included within our scope as an advisor to inform the client in advance if something that we see might be associated as a simple minor error or to a different level, and
yes.
the consequences of those might be.
Also in France, we have a liability penalty if one of our clients goes to criminal tax, and it's applicable to tax advisor, to CPA, and to lawyers. So that's why we are in France. We are all in the same, I would say, basket, and should be have some awareness about it. But thank you. So, if I may, it's a ladder of different penalties and the degree of mistake. To you, what are the most common tax danger areas in Portugal?
I think that I would start with VAT, withholding tax, and social securities, because those are taxes or contributions that are not really, the company acts as an intermediary. So it collects it from the employees, from the companies, and delivers it to the state or to the social security. And if the company keeps it, for example, for liquidity purposes, this can be considered a major offense and can be considered a crime. So this is really a very danger area to go. Of course, if I would say that fake invoices or stimulus transactions can also be other types of areas. So, for example, management fees with no real evidence of work, that is not correct. And also related party transactions, because groups sometimes assume that internal charges are low risk, which is not true.
And
But the
in
real
France
question,
right now, the tax authorities are very aggressive with question of tax residence. Do you have the same issue in Portugal? For me, I think France is very aggressive because the criteria are very subjective. We don't have a certain amount of days. So maybe you don't have this type of topic. Do you have this type of topic in
more and
Portugal?
more
More
and
and more?
more. Yes, because I think that currently what I see, not only from an individual, from a person, and for a company perspective. Considering companies, I think that more and more, and especially after COVID, you can work from anywhere, and especially the management of companies. So I think that is a hot topic right now. I see this every day with my clients, because top directors just move within Europe. That might be in France, in Spain, or whatever. And sometimes they don't realize, but they might be creating a tax risk just because of their work in other jurisdictions. And a part of my work is also to inform them about the risks of taking those positions. What I see from an audit perspective is that tax authorities are more and more questioning, or we will come there. Eventually, they will use some tools, some AI tools, to prove that the person was or was not resident in Portugal during that period, using, for example, invoices, electricity, water, whatever, or even tolls. We have seen recently newspaper news addressing this. So I think this will be more and more. My expectation is more and more this will be a hot topic.
Yeah, especially do they have access to social media as well? And to recently we have, I think it was last week, a soccer player who had a prosecution, tax prosecution on the residents, and one of the proof was the Uber Eats
Exactly. So I think we will get there.
request. So okay.
I think we will get there eventually if, under a procedure of audit, access to these more direct proofs are requested. They can serve as a proof that the person was or not was not there. So I think we will get there.
So if we move now to a real case tax audit, okay, I am in Portugal, enjoying the coast, working from home. I have not fulfilled my VAT correctly, and my company received a tax audit notice. What should I do?
I think that the first thing is not to panic, nor to improvise.
Yes. I panic.
I think that if we are speaking about a company, maybe an internal coordinator of this audit might be identified, like a person that make all the trial, that segregates whatever is received and sent to the tax auditor, because sometimes you just need one person to oversee everything, just to make sure that the correct interpretation regarding what is being requested is done. And the next thing is to involve advisors immediately, because sometimes an external entity might understand better what is the objective behind the request and better defend you. What is the role of a tax advisor, as myself, for example, is just to make sure that the factual background is gathered and identified what happened, who decided, what documents exist, the tax position that was taken, and to avoid any contradiction between documents. That is really in the best interest of the company.
Yes, to reconciliate. To reconciliate.
To anticipate.
And
yes, to be two steps ahead the tax auditor because of its experience. So it might be decisive in my view.
Yes, I think, yes, thank you. It's very important to highlight. In France, I also have this additional maybe comments. We have a very military system of hierarchy in the tax authorities. And depending on which service you receive the demand, the answer is expected to be different. If it's someone who is an agent, it's only because there is really a number which doesn't meet with another data. Whereas if it comes from inspector, it means the file has been checked in more depth. Do you have this type of, this hierarchy is visible? Yes? Okay. Yeah, so it's very, I don't know if it's European or it's just because Portugal and France are very close, but it's interesting. Okay.
Yes, in addition to being a tax advisor, I'm also an auditor. So I review things, really cross-checking the consistency, and I think that's value added within a.
So how would you define your role when you have this type of events? When it's a more reactive, because of course we know that, I would remember all our listeners that as a tax advisor, of course, you are in advisory, in preparation, and the type of client with tax audits, it's from the state standpoint, and they made some regular audits. So it's a specific role when you are more in defense, I would say, as an advisor.
Yes, of course. I think my role normally is to connect the dots between the business reality, the accounting evidence, and the legal framework. I can share that recently I had an audit of a client that started to be my client this year, but the fiscal years that were included in the audit, which were 2 or 3 years before, so I was not the consultant at the time. And I had, because we were dealing with the acceptance of a tax credit, and that tax credit was generated in much previous years, we had to go to 10 years before. And for each year, we would need to prepare a tax dossier to support the creation of that credit, simply because in the year that was being audited, we have, for example, 3 different years of tax credit, and they had to go 10 years back to review it. The client did not have it. The client just had a simple Excel file with a calculation, but the request that is included in the law is that for supporting that tax credit, you really need to have an extensive file. So during 15 days, I have to look for it. Actually, this was a subsidiary of a big French multinational. And let's see. This was
prevention in France. I guess now they like prevention, but prevention in France is always, it's still a struggle.
Yes, and actually, to be honest, that was my first.
How was the outcome? Did you did well?
The outcome is not. It's not.
Still okay.
Still, this was like maybe 15 days ago. But my first comment was in respect of French multinationals. French multinationals don't like to share information within the group. So this is really a big group.
Very French. What you describe is very French.
And basically they said, no, we have it all ready. Don't worry, we have it. But then at the end, they did not have anything. This situation just served to demonstrate that I think that I understood they speak as if they were on the top of the world. And sometimes they said, I'm in France, I apply for France, this is correct. But for Portugal, we will deal with it. So it's minor thing. It's
I
minor.
think it's a wrong belief of, so maybe it's a cliche, but, and of course there are lots of exceptions, but I think it may be a wrong belief of many French nationals and corporations about the fact that we always feel like France is one of the most complex systems in the world. And then when there is investment out of France, it's easy and simple. And thank you to share that it's maybe it's lighter, like maybe indeed Portugal is maybe more business attractive lately and for many reasons, but each state has a rule and you have to know it and to complete it, because indeed otherwise when you have a tax audit the consequences are dramatic, and the work you had as advisor to make this 15 days regularization take much time and energy than if it's done on time. So thank you for, I'm not saying it's king of the world, so I understand the feeling, but for me, it's more like we have this wrong belief between French of, okay, our country is so complicated everywhere. In any other country, it's easy, and to be too relaxed, I would say.
Yes. And
what do you think about that? I'm too French in my answer. No, it's interesting to have this view from your practice.
Yes, and this was just to defend 1.5 million euros in tax credits. So it was really a big amount. So let's see how it goes.
It will, I think. So thank you for sharing this view. So to your opinion, what preventive measures you would recommend to clients?
Of course, I think that every companies might have more straightforward transactions and other more risky positions. If you have a tax director that can really understand the difference, he or she might be willing to do the extra mile for those sort of riskier transactions. So what I would recommend is that for those types of transactions, you be extra careful, because the probability of those transactions being audited might be higher. And for those transactions, I would recommend to take a position of preparing a contemporaneous documentation, to be stricter in terms of control, or in terms of preparing documentation for those transactions, and to being like an audit ready file to deal with that if the situation comes later on. Because that is the difference between being, if the question is made like, why did you do this? The company can simply answer quickly, consistently, and with evidence. And sometimes, and I tell this to my clients, sometimes you take that type of transaction, more riskier transaction in a certain year, and then people change jobs, you change a software, the memory is not the same, and 3 or 4 years later, the person that is there, that probably might not be you, how can the person react to that question if nothing is on file? It's difficult.
That's very valuable what you are sharing. I see that time is already flying. Before I wrap up with maybe the 3 takeaways of a discussion, while we were preparing, you told me, I really this sentence, you told me, do not treat collected taxes as working capital. Can you share what you think about why you were thinking about this sentence? And I really think it's very strong.
I was just referring to a recent case that I have.
Hello? Yes.
That the company was facing liquidity problems. It has used the withholding taxes just to pay other type of invoices, and that is really a bad decision to take, because you are using money that is not your own, and that can actually become a criminal, might have a criminal effect. That is my advice. You just do not use money that is not yours. And VAT.
This is what's very interesting in the mindset of many entrepreneurs, even big companies. Some of them can consider when they collect VAT, it's almost their money.
No.
Yes. No, but that's why it's in the mindset, especially of, so it will be not for big company, we said more for startuppers or new entrepreneurs that it's really the basics. Don't mix your money, and VAT is not your money.
Exactly.
So I really
So
like,
that
and I think it's a really important phrase, do not treat collected taxes as working capital. This is universal, I think, a rule. And it's not obvious from young entrepreneurs who see the cash flow coming and consider cash flow as a cash flow.
yes, exactly. Just forget that part.
Thank you so much, Catarina. I'm going
It was a
to
pleasure.
thank you. It was really interesting to compare the system and to have this snapshot. I think if I have 3 takeaways, I think it's a universal and we will never repeat it enough. Build the file before you need the defense. That's absolutely important. As we just said, is do not treat your collected taxes as working capital, as your money. And what was particularly important is be very careful to the first response to a tax audit. And this should be the latest time you contact an advisor, because if this step is missed, I understand that in Portugal it can be a huge issue. I would say exactly the same for France. So thank you very much, and I hope it was very useful for our listeners. Thank you, Catarina. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Delphine.
You've been tuning into Delphine Parigi's podcast, Tax Defense Connect by DPZ. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.